Before we begin, I should mention that Blender recently launched the Blender 3.6 LTS. LTS stands for long-term support, and this is what we'll be using. So if you head on over to the blender.org website, you'll be able to see this. Of course, you might be watching this video at future dates, and you can have access to this by going over to download, especially if you're not seeing the Blender 3.6 LTS just right on your website. So go over to download. Once you go to download, go to long-term support and scroll down, then you'll be able to see the long-term support versions. And you can download this one, and that's what we'll be using. So open up Blender and let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about materials and textures. On the screen, we have this cube over here. And of course, for every action I take, you can find it on this bottom left corner of the screen. You'll see my clicks, you'll see my keyboard actions and all that. So you can just watch at the bottom left corner of the screen and you see everything. Okay, so we have this cube over here. When we talk about materials, we talk about how objects look and feel. For example, this cube over here can be made to look like a wooden box based on the roughness that is attributed to it. It can also be made to look like a glass box. For example, going over to the material tab and going to the roughness, you can crank that down a bit and you'll be able to see some sort of like reflections on that particular surface. And let's say we also wanted it to be sort of, have more metallic properties to it. You can crank the metallic values up as well, and you can now see that it's more reflective. And that's the idea of using materials. However, if we were to make this object look wooden, we might want to go over to maybe take down the metallic values and increase the roughness, but this doesn't look wooden, even though we know that wooden objects have no metallic sort of look to it, or it's also rough. And this is where textures come in. So what are textures? Textures are simply 2D images, pictures that are used to define the surface appearance of an object to which is applied. Now, textures are also called texture maps, and they can be used to change the color, patterns, or even add details like crevices, bumps, height, roughness to an image, or rather a 3D object, without changing the geometry of that 3D object. Now we have different types of textures, but before we dive into that, I'm going to talk about the shader editor. Previously, we've been working with this materials properties tab over here that allows us to work on the materials that is attached to an object. We actually have an extensive function in Blender called the shader editor. It has the same setup, but this time we work with nodes. I'm going to go over to this tab called shade. Click on it, you can see a bunch of nodes, and you can see that we've actually been working with nodes by going to this material tab, materials property tab, but now we can even add some extra nodes and connect them into what we call networks. To add a node, we can simply go over to this button over here that says add, and you can click on it and you can see that we can add different nodes. You can also come to any simple or plain space over here and click on Shift A. Same thing we usually do on the layout panel, and you can also add some nodes. Our focus is texture, so we're going to come right into texture. And you can see that we have different texture nodes we can work with.